Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Agents of Dev podcast. I'm Mitch Ashley, and I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice at Futurum, also a practitioner in my history. Of course, we're talking about all things dev, and I'm my co-host, Brad Shimmin, who is also analyst and practitioner. Say hello, Brad. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Brad Shimmin. I lead our practice on data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure here at Futurum. And Mitch, it's really nice to chat with you again today. And I understand we're going to be talking about my favorite subject, which is the battle for the hearts and minds of developers.
Yeah. So what happened? There's a great disturbance in the force. I thought we didn't need all these developers anymore, right? You're like, they're going to have to go find other jobs, and AI was going to do it all. Probably like for every other job, right? The over rotate on the hype around AI. And suddenly folks got religion about, hey, developers are important again. Matter of fact, we better go get those developers because that's who's going to build on our platform, use our technology, use our frontier models if we're that. And I'm speaking about, what happened at AWS reInvent. They kicked off like, developers, we love you. Here's our IDE. Here's the things that we're doing. I loved it. I stood and said to the CEO, I'm like, this is great. I never expected this to happen, but God bless you. I didn't say that, but God bless you for loving the developers again.
We bless you.
Got you here. Yes. And the other thing, Google is trying to sort of corral its cats of many doors into the Google developer universe, which is a different challenge. Of course,
there's a lot of spaghetti on that fridge.
yeah, there are. Some of it been on their own,
right? Oh, yes, exactly. And we're not scraping it off. We love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's history. It's art now. So, I have my thoughts on why. What's your perspective on what happened? What bit got flipped on some dip switch in a board somewhere? In the
that's a pun, or you is that a Freudian slip?
Actually,
I don't know.
Now that I said it, it is.
My goodness, yes, it does. That a wanton abandon that we seem to have embarked on a year or so ago with AI is just going to replace everybody, and any job that involves code and the written word will be gone in a year's time. Has certainly changed, or at least our perspective on it has changed. And you need to look no further than our own beloved Capitol here in the United States, which just announced a new program to hire back the folks who actually make this stuff run. It's a testament to just how important infrastructure is. And I think when we look at a few of the outages we've seen and why those outages happened, it all comes down to that infrastructure and keeping the lights on and how critical that is. And so you kind of couple that realization, that wake-up call, together with the fact that, as you and I have chatted about before, companies like Microsoft learned many, many years ago that if you want to capitalize on the enterprise, you need to win the hearts and minds of developers.
Hearts, minds, and keyboards.
Yep. Yeah. You got to have the tooling. The tooling is what developers gravitate. And I'm using that word, with all of its many different meanings toward, because, that gravity has impacts on who signs for what on the dotted line.
It's, what's fascinating too is sort of in parallel, not unrelated, very related, is I've heard Google and AWS say, we're not an infrastructure cloud, we're an application cloud. So repositioning even, well, at least for that audience anyway, they're an infrastructure cloud, no doubt, they definitely are. But it's interesting to hear them just say that. This is coming out of the developer kind of, but even at AWS reInvent, I think that came from the CEO, if I remember right.
And reflected in the tooling they rolled out. It was let's build apps, let's not build infrastructure. But you and I both know that when you build the apps, they run on infrastructure. So
I think it's bring me your tired, your poor, and your AI applications to run on my infrastructure.
All of them. And
Well,
there are a lot, right? Don't you think,
yeah.
Mitch? There's like this sudden embarrassment of riches right now for tooling, and if you look at like the Google ecosystem, my goodness, I was actually just yesterday chatting with one of our folks internally who, asked me. She said, "So I see that in Notebook LM, I can create a slide presentation from the resources that I upload, PDFs and whatnot." She says,
Mhm.
could you put that into this competitive intelligence tool that we're working on as a project?" And I said, "I would love to, but I'd have to build it from scratch because it's not in their API yet." And I use the
Yep.
word "yet" because I guarantee that will be in the API, because Google is aggressively, and I think we're going to chat about one of those a little later. Google is aggressively building out its API to incorporate increasingly higher levels of abstraction and more specific types of functionality that you can build on top of Gemini
Mhm.
and all of the Vertex AI resources.
Well, this is in part, at least anyway, the whole, is it all AI agents or is it all structured languages, with API calls and procedural? Well, no, it's never all one or the other. It's usually a hybrid, and pretty big hybrid, I think, in this
Agreed.
case. So,
Yeah.
you brought up the Google API question. I think it was Monday of this week. It may have been last week. It was Monday this week. Google announced this interactions API for its deep
Mm,
research model, which is not just an API. It's an API to essentially an agent that's acting on your behalf, doing work for you. But it brings with it structures, brings with it kind of memory and managing what it's doing over a long run. And it also brings more of a way of observing what's happening in your interactions, as
that is
opposed to
critical.
random sets of prompts that I might generate or I might use or whatever. It kind of puts more like programming, what we're used to, into the picture. So it's like structure meets, dynamic output. It's interesting.
Yeah, the rigor is important, isn't it? And observability is important. And when I saw that, my first thought was, "Oh, thank God! Now I don't have to use LangChain and LangGraph." And please, no offense to the folks making that
Uh,
software, because it is
they're old
fantastic.
friends. Old Lang's eye, old Lang's graph.
Well, it is, but everyone knows that if you're building something to scale in the enterprise, that LangChain's portfolio, while capable, is more difficult because it
Mhm.
isn't fully documented. It does change, and it's a little harder to integrate and to manage. And so when I say thank God, I'm like, yeah, I, as a builder, am inured in the Google Vertex AI ecosystem, and so seeing that build on, as you just mentioned, building on this new deep research API call that they just released a couple weeks back,
Mhm.
says to me, wow, I can use a consistent API. I have just one set of documentation that I need to manage and look at when I'm building something. And I like that.
And it's interesting that they did it with deep research for long running, kind of more involved type of interactions. So maybe you don't need it for kind of smaller interactions, or if you do, let's introduce this in a more challenging scenario where you really are going to need this API to help manage that interaction. So one of the things I get picked up of it is about this sort of idea of fragile prompt chaining, where you have ad hoc state handling happening when you're just doing prompts in processes between talking with agents. And of course, procedural structured languages don't think in prompts, right? They think in,
No, well, unless it's
pre-structured
just a
calls.
variable.
Well, unless it's my code, then it thinks randomly. But no, I'm just
Oh, does it? Does it? Oh, nice. Yeah, I like that. It's a
it has a
switch
mind of its
case
own, that's
using
for sure.
RAND.
Yes, turn off mind of my own parameter. Um, but so it's interesting to phrase it that way, in thinking about the sustained chain of
Yeah.
prompts and that being a fragile interaction. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition, and again, we saw that reflected in reInvents with AWS talking about long-running processes for code to code. Let's say like a code review to not just like add a feature, but instead to optimize. Let's say you have a huge repository or multiple repositories all working together, and you're looking at your bill, going, "Ooh, what happened there?" Well, the tools that AWS rolled out with its hero-based agent tooling. I
Yeah,
can't
the
think of the name
frontier
of it now.
models, I
Sorry.
think, is the frontier models, they call them, right? The long
Yes,
running.
but it's all on Nova, and
Mhm.
Claude, mostly Claude, I think.
Yeah, there's a
But
lot of cloud.
at any rate, it's the idea behind it was to have a process that maybe kicks off on Monday and doesn't finish until Friday, and when it's met its objective, and its objective may be a high level objective, not a add a button here, but instead a optimize my spend. Maybe that's the prompt. I
Mhm.
don't know. It could work that way because aren't these thinking reasoning routines within those large language models not very good at things like ascertaining the intent of a query based upon the context?
True. Yeah, well, interesting, and sort of procedural language isn't gonna be great about context either,
No.
right? Mhm. What it makes me think of too is we're in this stage of transitioning from everything as a prompt interaction, like we do with IDEs and, with the clients, et cetera, more than chatbots, just our interactions with models, to something that's more systemic or systematic. And
Mm.
because today, when you're doing development with an AI IDE, you're managing sessions and session state across, because you can only go so far in a session. Then you've got to start another one up. And everything I've read and I've started to do is, okay, just work on one change in one session, then start up another one
That's
and do
right.
another.
Document it.
Yeah, and document
Yeah.
it. Yeah, exactly. Because you get drift and suddenly, what was working well all of a sudden doesn't work well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was working with ChatGPT 5.2, or excuse me, GPT 5.2 over the weekend, just doing a little project. And I was like, dang, that worked well. This is really an improvement in what they've done in the sort of constraining the model from trying to write the world's most largest set of code for you that you could ever ask for, that you didn't,
Yeah.
right? It's
They're
just
all they
interesting
all
how
have a
it's
different
evolving.
personality with how they write code. That is
But they
very
all
true.
like to write code. Let me could I write that for you, please, please? It's kind of the big at your
Yeah, I
heels.
think like Claude is the most verbose, I would say, of those that I've worked with. It's good code,
Mhm.
but my goodness, do you really need to go that far?
Yep. Yep. Well, it's we're going into 2026 and we're working on our predictions, and I'm thinking about things like, okay, so how is the interaction model changing of how we create software, both in the tooling
Mm,
but also in the infrastructure of the software, whether it's agent control plane. Now we're seeing more APIs. So I think we'll see a lot more APIs like this that give you
yeah.
better structured. And I think that actually opens AI up to more people to use it, who are sort of, I don't know about this. I'm kind of dynamic, I might get a different answer every time. Give me a way to interface with this. I think it gives it a lot more people that can use it.
Yeah, you see that, don't you? In how these companies that we work with every day are building out their portfolios, and look at Google's. You've got their traditional Gemini chat, which can create artifacts. You've got Colab, which is that spaghetti on the fridge that I will never scrape off because I adore that tooling. You've got newerish things. I don't even know. You remember Project IDX that
I do
Google
remember
talked
IDX. Yeah.
about? It didn't go away. It's now
Yes.
Firebase Studio.
Yes, exactly. It's reincarnated into Firebase Studio,
Yeah,
which
and
who knows
and
what
you
that
have
will reincarnate into, right?
right, yeah, and then you have like the pure no code ideas like Opal, which is fascinating, and it looks like N8N without all the BS attached to it. And then you have, the more developer-ish, but still very user-friendly Google AI Studio. And then you have, Notebook LM, which I mentioned earlier, which, is very much a user experience, but, how far away is that from simply being a part of the infrastructure that developers in a company can work with? I would say not very far.
I got to believe it's going to happen. I mean, it's already sort of part of Google Workspace, but not quite yet. It's
Right.
a standalone thing, but that's going to be part of it. Like here, I want these documents. I want this stuff to be in my notebooks. Use this folder as a notebook. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Now,
I'll put this as a full stack app and host it on Firebase with Firebase.
Ooh, there's some dot connection going on there. Boy,
Right.
you're reading ahead in the book, aren't you? You're on
It's just
chapter 6.
fascinating. Yeah, it really is.
Well, we probably should, go to our next segment. So it is time for the drop.
Okay, it's time for the drop.
Okay, we're back. I love our intro and our graphic stuff. I'm so entertained. You did such a great job with that, you and Andy and everybody. So I'll jump on the bandwagon. It sort of what's on my brain this week is there's a lot of things to wrap up by end of the year. So we're working on predictions. We are tuning our practice areas, and someone actually who was an AR person said to me yesterday, well, those predictions that you're working on, don't get too comfortable with them because you'll want to change them in about 6 months. I'm like, you are very right. So my time horizon of what is a prediction has changed from, in 2030, this is what's going to happen. If you're high enough level, you can do that. And you really think about the work that people are doing with AI, that changes monthly, almost weekly. So I'm trying to reset what I think a prediction is, both some long-term and also short-term. How about you? What's the drop for you?
Yeah, I'm now thinking maybe we should just, how we move to the Gregorian calendar like that. Maybe we should do the same thing and have 2026 and a half. Just go solstice to solstice.
0.5.
Right. And maybe that's more in line with how fast the world seems to be evolving right now. Maybe an annual budget, annual this, annual that is a little too slow for us. But seriously, right now, what's on my mind is cultivating a bit of disdain for MCP, and also for training cutoff dates, and the fact that, as I've mentioned, I think in one of our earlier podcasts, it's been very frustrating, wherein you have a set of documents, an API that you're working with, and as we just talked about, hey, there's a new API call that we want to do, and that one might be deep research, and I wanted to implement it last week, and so I said, working within Gemini CLI, hey, let's do this, man. Here's this new API. And I, had it do a URL context, which is a tool that Google has because, they own the index of everything on the web. So they don't even have to scrape websites anymore. You just give it the URL and it has all the data. And it's still reverted to the API calls from 2024 in setting it up. It was very frustrating, and I thought maybe what would be best to do is simply to do it more programmatically instead of. Oh, and by the way, I should mention I even had it consult Context 7 to look it up, and it failed with that. Right. And so I said, maybe what I should do, and I haven't tried this yet, but to do it more programmatically through an API call, because, you can query a function and see what it does. So, if I import the Gemini, library for their models, I can query them and say, what are you expecting from this function call? What are the parameters? What are the outputs? And maybe that's how, I should be thinking about adding functionality is to start with that baseline of what the import is for the library that I'm using, and then just inquiry after the library that's loaded, that's running in the app.
I mean, you're not going to go back to the man pages and figure out what does this API do?
Well, apparently it ignores that. It doesn't care so much.
Not so much for that. No, you bring up a really great point, which is, when technology is truly transformative, how you interact and how you use it changes. And it sometimes breaks the model, our mental model, like you're talking about it. Well, maybe it isn't looking it up in the code library and trying to understand what it does and walk through whatever I need to see, what the parameters are. And maybe there is some documentation, maybe not. Now it's code explain. Now it's query explain, right?
Right.
Tell me what this does. How do I best call this? What are the kind of results if I call it this way versus that, kind of interaction?
Yeah, it's just a tool call at that point. It's like, every thinking model in particular, but all of the agentic tools that we have built-in LSPs or, PALs for doing just like Python execution to do basic math and stuff. And so why can't it just, use the code that it's got?
Mm-hmm. Well, just to wrap up, back on the idea of 2026 and a half, or my idea of 2026.5, we couldn't do that.
Yes.
We
I hate
couldn't
fractions
because
too.
we would have to start, January would have to be 0. So that,
Yeah.
which is
Just
what would
increment
happen
it before
if we
you
started
loop it.
over and came up with our calendaring system.
That's right. I shift all my arrays so they start at 1.
You do. Well, good man. I'll be sure to remember that if I look at your code. Oh, crap. That's why it's
like, what the heck is that?
Boy, that would really mess with people.
Wouldn't it?
For sure. All right, Brad. It's been fun. We won't see each other on the road for a while, but we will see each other here on Agents of Dev. So thanks for doing this podcast together. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it too. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We're looking forward to seeing you next time.
We are. You can reach out to us at agentsofdev@futurumgroup.com. Love to hear from you. Feedback, comment on the podcast platform that you particularly use and like. We'd love to hear from you. We will absolutely watch comments and hear the criticisms and the praise or anything in between. See what you like to hear. We are having guests come on, so we're kind of tuning up, scheduling up who we think we might have on. I think one of our first folks will be the CTO from Futurum, who's building our intelligence platform. And
looking forward to that.
He's a pretty brilliant guy. He's done some amazing things. So I'm excited to talk with him. We'll announce that coming up here. But we have other people interested in being on. So if you're interested in talking about Agents of Dev, reach out to us at that email address. We'd love to hear from you. So, well, Brad, signing off. Have a good rest of the week. We'll see everybody back on the next episode. Thanks for listening and watching.
Thanks, everybody. See you, Mitch.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.